Hey guys, and welcome back to another Langrisser mobile video. If you didn't already know, Dieharte is one of my favorite characters in the game, but he will always be overshadowed by Leon or Zerida, depending on which final class you choose. And the reason why is because of their overpowered talents. Leon has the ability to hit and run, while also having a damage and defense increase per tile moved before battle. And Zerida has a crit chance and crit damage increase, a damage reduction buff, and also a mobility buff. So now let's take a look at Dieharte's talent. He has a crit chance increase and a damage reduction buff if and only if you kill an enemy. Now, the issue with Dieharte is that he doesn't really have a talent until you eliminate an enemy, and even then, his talent is pretty lackluster compared to Zerida, who has way more benefits. However, in saying that, Dieharte is still one of my favorite characters in the game, and I pledge to make him my best character. So now let's talk about his class. For PvE, you generally want to play as the Royal Knight for the extra mobility. Most of the time in PvE, you employ hit and run tactics, or you stand outside the danger zone and then you attack the next turn. So the extra mobility helps you to perform this task. In terms of PvP, you want to play as the High Master, so that you can deal lots of crit damage and attack high priority targets. So now let's move on to equipment. Dieharte actually has a character specific helmet that only he can equip, called the Golden Lion, and its effect is after killing an enemy, a target within 3 tiles will become stunned, which is a similar effect to Bozil's sleep skill. Now this puts even more emphasis on Dieharte needing to kill an enemy to become effective, and sadly it's not as easy as it sounds, which is why Dieharte really requires perfect gear to excel. Cavalry Dieharte is flexible with equipment, however Assassin Dieharte requires the Extreme Magic Bow to remove the melee damage reduction, and a Monkey King's Vest, which increases attack percentage and crit percentage whenever you are attacked. These two items actually synergize really well together. As for your helmet, like I said before, it's the Golden Lion whenever it comes out on global. And lastly, for your accessory, anything with plus attack percentage will do. Let's move on to Dieharte's enchantments. I did a bit of testing to see whether Meteor or Blazing Sun was better for Dieharte. The thing is, Meteor increases all damage dealt during battle by 20%, whereas Blazing Sun increases crit damage by 25%. And since Dieharte actually has a fixed damage skill called Sneak Attack, I wanted to see if the 20% increased damage from Meteor also applied to fixed damage. But sadly it does not. So Blazing Sun will actually do the most damage, but only if you crit. Which is why your Dieharte really needs to be 6-starred ASAP. To increase his crit chance from his talent, and to also gain extra stats to skill. Speaking of skill, Dieharte actually has a lot of skill sets that he can use. So let's start with the Cavalry line. For Cavalry Dieharte, you want to be using Strike, Move Again, and either Onrush or Thousand Hooves. Sneak Attack actually does do more damage than Move Again. So Move Again increases your damage by 10%, and I actually tested to see if this increase of 10% damage affected your fixed damage, like Sneak Attack, and it doesn't. However, on Cavalry Dieharte, you have a much lesser skill stat compared to the Assassin Dieharte. So that means that you won't be critting as often. And that just means that Move Again is more consistent, whereas Sneak Attack only applies when you do a crit. So on Cavalry Dieharte, you want to be using Strike, Move Again, and an attack skill just for consistency. There might be times where you don't need to use Strike. You say like you're playing on a small map or something, and you don't really need to rely on mobility, then I would replace Strike with Violent Dash. Violent Dash is a really good skill. The only issue is it costs too much to use. It costs 2 skill points. But it does increase your damage by a lot. And it's everything that Dieharte really needs, actually. It has crit and crit damage increase. So you'll be critting much harder and more often. And if you are using Violent Dash on Dieharte, then you can replace Move Again with Sneak Attack. Like I said before, Sneak Attack only applies when you crit, and thanks to Violent Dash, which increases your crit chance by 15%, you'll be critting more often, and you'll be doing more damage with Sneak Attack. The same can't be said for Assassin Dieharte. Assassin Dieharte only has 3 mobility, so it's really important when you're playing Assassin Dieharte, especially in PvP, that you're able to one-shot a target on turn 1 or really early on. So you need all the mobility you can. So you'll be using Strike, Sneak Attack, and Calamity. Calamity is your best attack skill for an assassin because you can ignore guard. So you can focus on attacking a high priority target first. If you're using Dieharte as your main DPS, I do not recommend you bring the faction buff, Light of Hope, only because it really restricts your damage output. But if you are playing Origin of Light, then obviously you do need Dieharte to faction buff your team. But yeah, so if you are using Dieharte as your DPS, don't bring the faction buff. And yeah, that's about it for Dieharte. I actually had to cut out quite a bit of information from the video from keeping it too long. So if you do have any questions, please comment down below. And yeah, thank you guys for watching.